waves or their heart,
brain
or
wave,
their blood in their body, maybe even their skin in some crazy.
Wait, so senses, blood, brain waves, like what is this? We got the strongest stand, soft and wet. Hey, yo, go beyond. Let's check it out. That's Mad Pause.
Is Soft and Wet Go Beyond the strongest stand in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure? A bit of a controversial take, I know, or at least a question to ask in this day and age of power scaling, and even more so when it comes to the JoJo's fandom. Due to the fact for a very long time with this series, there were only ever two to consider the strongest quote-unquote, or to be the ultimate stand quote-unquote.
I
that
gotta
being
see
Gold
this.
Experience Requiem and Tusk Act 4. But due to the ending of JoJolion and adding two very, very powerful stands to the vast array of stands that we already had, that being Wonder View and Soft and Wet Go Beyond.
Yeah, we
it's
know
now
about
kind
Wonder
of
View.
made a lot of people challenge / think about new ideas when it comes to what is the strongest stand, as this idea has been festering for a very long time. As a guy that primarily just likes to cover JoJo's content because he thinks it's cool, I often see comments asking what is the strongest stand, and I usually give them answers like, I don't know, something I guess, just because I don't want to start some fire of a thread in my comment section. But after realizing I do have a bit of a degree of influence, that coming from Wonder Review and making the arguments for him so popular thanks to a lot of my Wonder Review related videos, maybe I should be asking this question to change people's opinions, at least in an educated form. And with that being said, at least knowing my influence now, if you see somebody saying some random characters the strongest in JoJo's, maybe you should share this video. Just a food for thought. You don't have to. This is all you guys watching. I don't really care. I'm just some random dude on the internet. Just you guys watching is good enough for me. And I would like to give a shout out to my homeboy Jobber, as a lot of the ideas I'm going to be spewing about later on in this video heavily do come from him, so shout out to my boy. So with that being said, I guess a lot of you are wondering who's Josuke Higashikata and Soft and Wet, as this is going to be pretty important for at least the early scaling and just overall the character. So surprisingly, Josuke is not one, but actually two characters. Those two characters being Yoshikage Kira of the Alternative Universe, being that of Steel Ball Run, and Josefumi Kujo. Both characters have their own abilities, stands, character personalities, and overall are two different characters from what we know to become Josuke. How these two would meet would be under some very weird circumstances, as Yoshikage Kira of this universe would discover the rock humans and their plans with Lokakaka. Josefumi, having a life debt to Kira due to him saving his life earlier on in his life, would of course help Kira. Not to get into any heavy spoilers here, but more or less the two would eventually fight the rock humans and, well, kind of lose. Kira would die of his injuries, but Josefumi, trying to save him, would eat of the Lokakaka, activating exchange of the fruit. But alas, nothing would occur, and what would actually happen is, due to some debris falling on them, the fusion process of the fruit would occur, causing some parts of Kira's body to graft onto Josefumi's body, resulting in him losing his memories and becoming a new person in his entirety, later being named Josuke after the head of the household of the Higashikatas.
What the hell?
Now, why I bring up this backstory is
sound like some JoJo shit.
It involves a fusion of characters, a trope we see in anime and manga a lot. Josuke's powers of Soft and Wet are the combination of Josefumi's Soft and Wet and Yoshikage Kira's Killer Queen. And to call back to a recent video of mine, what if Johnny Joestar fought Diego Brando, there's an idea I posed with Tusk Act 4, which states that when Tusk Act 4 fought the world, there has to be at least some levels of callback to the original Jotaro vs. Dio fight, which in that fight, those stands are massively faster than light speeds, AP clocking in at large town to even mountain level, depending on who you're asking, and are very, very powerful stands, which should all call back into Tusk Act 4 versus Diego Brando in his The World. What I'm trying to say here is this: when Araki reuses a stand, it more or less is the same stand, just slightly tweaked for the scenario that it's in, which means we also have to scale Part 4 Yoshikage Kira's powers. And to cut it a buck with you here, Kira from Part 4 should be at least faster than light speeds, AP clocking, and about large building level. I'm not going to go any deeper than that. You just basically scale him off of Josuke from that part. Bare minimum. There you go. Because he scales off of Jotaro, which is also kind of funny in that scenario. So you're looking at Josuke from Part 8 with his Soft and Wet fusion stand, technically, to be looking around faster than light speeds, at least clocking into at least small building to large building level. Note, I would like to add a massive asterisk to that entire statement. Due to the fact that you have to go through a lot of loopholes and some very narrative power scaling that you kind of have to interpret yourself, as Araki doesn't really go in depth with it. The only thing here for a fact that I can say without a doubt is, of course, Yoshikage Kira's AP, which with his bubbles can destroy a boat absolutely, and that power does transfer over to Josuke. On the flip side of that, with Josefumi, the only thing that we really know that Josefumi gives to Josuke is his kind of plunder ability, or at least his pre-plunder ability, which is just to absorb things and just kind of attach them onto other things. Kind of like a fusion of things, but it's really weird and not really talked about too well, which in the grand scheme of everything just becomes completely something else in its entirety. And Josefumi does have some fighting skill that does transfer over to Josuke pretty naturally. I would almost say instinctually, but we're pushing it there. So when it comes to overall regular Josuke, he's pretty powerful, as his previous two fusion components are really strong, at least for the few times we've seen them on panel. And we're only beaten due to, well, numbers and hacks. So Josuke's overall stats for his soft and wet and himself are pretty good, if not even better when fused, as Josuke was able to beat all of his previous opponents in his previous double lives, thanks to and in part to his bubbles, primarily being his ability to plunder and the explosive pop that we see later on in the part. To describe plunder is pretty weird, as now looking back onto the ability, while a lot of people have the misconception it's able to take away anything, it actually doesn't. It can only take away physical things from an object for a very short time, but even then, under its context, it's still really busted, as in earlier in Jojoin, it's able to take away a lot of conceptual things that are physical to a person. What I mean by this is Josuke can literally take away friction from a person, or the ability to take away sound producing from objects nearby, and in some extreme examples are able to just straight up take away the senses and feelings from people for a very short time. Then in later Jojoin, it's much simpler and not dramatic, as in Josuke is not using his abilities against people, but I would like to clarify here, this is a classic example of Araki kind of soft nerfing his main character, as he realizes, oh damn, I made them too strong, due to the fact that under
they broken.
Plunder works, as it's able to take something away from a thing physically for a very short period of time. Josuke could in theory take away somebody's brain waves, or their heart, or their blood in their body, maybe even their skin in some crazy.
Wait, so senses, blood, brain waves, like what is this?
Examples, as a short period of time without those certain things in the human body could result in death. And even in later Jojoing with the plunder ability, Josuke still uses it pretty tactically, meaning that Josuke is a pretty smart fighter, as he kind of stores the nearby elements of a fight within the bubble for later. And when it comes to Josuke's explosive pop ability, which is supposed to be a kind of callback to his previous life of Yoshikage Kira and his Killer Queen's bombs, they're not too wild, they just kind of explode, but not in kind of the bombastic way that Killer Queen's bombs would explode. So when you look at Josuke before Soft and Wet Go Beyond, I think you guys can realize, yeah, he's pretty powerful. Plunder and his overall kind of new fuse stats are really, really good, at least in the terms of JoJo's, as I personally would probably put him up in the top 15 strongest stands. The only stands that are actually kind of beating him are literally the time manipulating stands and the stands in the series that just kind of manipulate fate, quote unquote. I would confidently say that he probably is literally the last stand before we entered the time manipulating stands and the rest of the strongest stands in the series. But as of now, we have entered the realm of the strongest stands in the franchise. How does Josuke go from a man with no memories to the logic defeater? Well,
wonder if you
logic
that
is
man
the
is scary.
Of all concepts, because every concept needs logic for it to be created. Technically, this is the highest truth in all of JoJo. It remains forever. It's linked to literally everything in the universe, no matter what, and is an absolute law that reigns over everything thanks to some statements within JoJoian, and nobody can technically reasonably stand against it whatsoever. Curses are the highest form of logic, which Wonder Review is. A curse that technically started all the events in the Steel Ball Run universe.
And the way way he talks about Wonder View.
Part 8 Jojolian. And if you read the themes of the series in general up until this point, you can say that Wonder View is behind every calamity in the series. A quote from Jojolian Volume 27. This type of topic is something I can't avoid. Who is the strongest villain? What is strength? What is peak fortune? I've decided the strongest and most terrifying adversary one can face is called Calamity. Calamity attacks irrationally, but is actually bounded by a certain type of logic, and will encroach every person equally. It's too powerful, and trying to overcome it might be actually beyond hope. With this volume statement, Araki states Wonder View ability-wise is above every main villain in JoJo's
above every villain.
This includes Valentine's D4C Love Train, who was previously the strongest villain. A villain who is able to cross into different dimensions, as D4C Love Train's ability was able to redirect misfortune to different times and different places. Furthermore, D4C Love Train is stated in the JoJo Viller Guidebook to transcend dimensions and mathematical dimensions. Mathematical dimensions is...
Wait, who has the Wonder View stand? Does anybody got it? Or I'm just forgetting. I don't know.
For alternate universes amount to being transcended is infinite. So that means D4C Love Train transcends over all universes within the multiverse, thanks to the corpse parts and his ability. So this means if the volume 27 statement is true and Wonder View is the strongest villain now, this means that he even transcends above mathematical dimensions and even D4C Love Train's barrier, which is conceptual, and his entire purpose is to misdirect misfortune. Now, getting into the more concept explaining slash cosmology and how this universe actually works, there is this thing heavily explained in part 8 and part 7 about good and bad, yin and yang duality, as some people like to call it. It's a foundational law slash concept in JoJo's that exists. Everything has an opposite. If there's good, then there's bad. If there's light, then there's dark. That is the whole truth in JoJo's part 7 and 8. That has been explained thoroughly through Valentine, Jobin, and a few other characters. Wonder View is one of those truths by logic, which is another thing I'll get into later, but just keep with me here. What is also explained is that duality between all things is and should be equal or balance out to zero. I would also like to, at this point in the video, heavily point out these ideas are not platonic, as why would an author like to put these ideas in his stories if they're not supposed to be connected in some way? And definitely in part 7 and 8, as these stories are a lot more grown up and a lot more mature compared to at least previous parts. With that being said, Wonder View definitely scales above D4C Love Train, and it's pretty impressive, but it can go even farther than that. Wonder View even scales above Tuss Act 4. Wonder View has a calamity on the Higashikata family, which is a family dying from the rock disease, and is something they couldn't break. Johnny tried to break this curse with the corpse parts, but failed. Johnny tried to shoot the curse with Tuss Act 4 to end it, but Tuss Act 4 got reflected by the curse, and Johnny died due to the calamity. It's a consistent fate that all family members who try to save...
Man, once I'm caught up with JoJo, bro, this will all make sense, bro. I'm gonna watch this video again.
Their children from the curse usually end up dying because of it. Moving on to the next idea that involves Wonder View is society and reality. These concepts are the universe and how people interact with them. To keep it short, as this part could be extremely lengthy if I just kept on going, in part 7, society is called the universe, and whoever takes the first path will invent the foundations slash things into existence. Mamazuku explains that Wonder View through calamity slash karma attacks you with everything you've ever interacted with in society, and being the complete badass he is actually shows it visually in real time. Wonder View slash calamity is a law that will never go away and will forever remain in this world. Worlds in JoJo in the context of manipulating reality slash space slash times are the universes. Wonder View is by far probably one of the strongest stands in this series, not even joking. It has the ability to manipulate you and your actions is to be stated to be even above multiverses and concepts of the sort. Wonder View is a multiversal entity that exists through all universes, as fate, gravity, calamity, and logic can all be summed up as the same thing, as everything has its opposite and
ugly as hell.
And to get into more power scaling terms, Wonder View is technically a type 2 abstract existence entity, as he simply is one with logic and will always come back because of it. Even destroyed mind, body, and soul, his energy, the calamity energy, will still exist afterwards. So even if Toru dies, Wonder View will come back, giving him a high godly level regeneration. So with all of that context now given to you guys, how does
what was the writer thinking about making this man, bro? Like, damn, let me just make a broken character. That's what he just said. Like,
Soft and Wet go beyond, scale above, Wonder
no
View.
weaknesses.
Wonder View is stated to be above all JoJo villains' abilities, which include D4C Love Train, and the only thing in JoJo's that can beat Wonder View is Soft and Wet Go Beyond, calling back to that volume 27 statement, which, under the context of everything I said, Wonder View exists in every individual JoJo universe / world. Soft and Wet Go Beyond transcends all logic and transcends the logic known as Calamity. The bubble spins infinitely till there's zero. Finally, they don't exist in our world. The bubbles themselves are illogical, and due to this, they beat Toru and Wonder View. And even when Calamity came back to attack the Higashikatas, Josuke was absolutely able to destroy even that, kind of making the bubbles able to destroy concepts, which is kind of crazy.
Destroy concepts?
You were to layer all the strongest stands, or at least all the concepts in JoJo, some of the strongest stands like Tussac 4, D4C Love Train, GR would still be bound by the ideas of Wonder View and logic, as that's kind of the supreme thing within the idea of JoJo. Gravity, fate, all of that is surrounding all other things in this universe, or at least in this franchise. The bubbles are outside that circle. They don't care and are able to damage / completely destroy it in some cases. Quickly circling back to explain all of this, when you talk about the strongest stands in the franchise, there's
the best
levels
fire
of infinity at the
David, stop.
Using D4C Love Train as a foundation so that we can build Tuss Act 4 and Wonder View off of, Wonder View is established as being fundamentally superior to them, as he is an abstract concept of logic and reason in JoJo that exists everywhere in the infinite multiverse as law and won't go away. Soft and Wet Go Beyond fits the 5D qualifications because it goes beyond infinity both logically and literally, as the bubbles
Man, this JoJo world deep
until they reach zero, and infinity is logic in JoJo, which Soft and Wet Go Beyond transcends. Final reasonings here is that all dimensions of space-time, the infinite JoJo multiverse here, are logical and within reason. So we got D4C Love Train as the multiversal plus foundation, Tuss Act 4 being infinity. You can sneak GR in here above Tuss Act 4 being infinity and kind of controlling fate a little bit, at least subparts of Wonder View. And at the very top, Wonder View being this conceptual infinity entity that reigns above all of them, enclosing them into that metaphorical circle I said earlier, which Soft and Wet Go Beyond doesn't exist in. To give a stat breakdown of Soft and Wet Go Beyond, it is a being that does not technically exist anywhere, where there is logic and reasoning, that being all of time and space to a conceptual, not out-of-versal level. Possibly if you did scale Wonder View high enough, you could get to low out-of-versal there, but I don't think the scaling's that high, but he could be there. It would be pretty safe to say with all the information I've provided that Soft and Wet Go Beyond's bubbles are at least 5D in terms of hacks, and when it comes to speed, it's probably immeasurable. Given the speed of the bubble would be illogical too. Immeasurable being the highest in the JoJo verse, logically, as in speed, going off the basis of Made in Heaven Poochie, as it stated for him that he is either infinite or immeasurable, depending on past video scaling.
Made in Heaven.
I asked the question again, is Soft and
Wet Go Beyond broken.
The strongest stand in JoJo's? With everything I said and my educated opinion, yeah, he probably is. And I'm probably even going to take that back. He is, actually, at least in my opinion. Now we enter the GR argument here, as this is something I have to at least touch on and debate.
GR.
I would like to clarify here that Golden Wind did release, at least at the timing of this video,
oh yeah, we've seen this in the top 10.
27 years ago, almost 28. With that context in mind, I would like to at least present the ideas that Araki can change his opinion on who's the strongest, as this is his franchise to dictate and rule over. So I'm just gonna go through some arguments here, and that's
he is the writer.
I'm just gonna briefly state them and maybe talk about them in a later, much bigger video, maybe putting these two characters up against each other, as this video is already long enough. GR is technically still logical, as it has no descriptions of anything remotely illogical compared to the canon definition of its powers. Araki literally says when looking back in the entirety of the series in terms of who's the most powerful, he says Wonder Review is the most powerful, and to beat him is beyond hope. Heavily
Beyond
implying
hope.
Soft and Wet Go Beyond can, and no other characters in the series could. Another one would be Wonder Review and Soft and Wet Go Beyond don't have actually any stand statements. Even the statements Wonder Review makes, a description of himself, even mirrors GER's Beyond Stand's statements, as literally the only ever time a stand literally says for themselves they are the strongest, Wonder Review is one of them, and the other being GER. In a weird sense, and even looking at this in real life, Golden Wind and Jojo were literally around at the same time. I wouldn't be surprised if Araki re-inspired himself seeing his own anime. Another one would be, of course, that no data book guide statements are up to date anymore. The whole canon idea that GER is the strongest stand is still technically, at least at the time of this recording, is still in question, as there is no data book that actually likes to fully describe Soft and Wet Go Beyond's and Wonder Review's abilities to their fullest with Araki's quotes next to them. Basically, what I'm trying to say here is there is no up-to-date data book with Part 8 stands in it. And one that I've been seeing very often now here, at least past JoJolian's ending, is that a lot of people are comparing Soft and Wet Go Beyond's bubble to TUS Act 4's spin for whatever reason. The bubble isn't the representation of the spin as a whole, it's just Josuke's spin. People trying to use the argument trying to dishonestly scale Soft and Wet Go Beyond to below or slightly above TUS Act 4 but not in its entirety, and then try to pull the whole GR transcends all of them just because it has no stats and TUS Act 4 does have stats, is pretty stupid and dishonest when it comes to Soft and Wet Go Beyond's power and GR's as a whole. No matter the type of translation you pull for Soft and Wet Go Beyond's stand card, it will never change the context that the stand card is Josuke's spin, not the concept of the spin. And everyone in the part makes it very, very clear that it's Josuke's spin and not some almighty representation of it like TUS Act 4. They call Josuke's spin illogical. The golden rotation, TUS Act 4 and Ballbreaker have absolutely nothing on the level of that thing and don't even compare to it. While it might be in the same family tree as it, it's not the same. It's just literal copium at this point. I would even argue at the most basic level of fundamental power scaling, like, oh yeah, maybe just the Requiems are quote-unquote the strongest. It's been damn near 30 years from Golden Wind, and stands have been progressively getting more complex and changing over time. Stands for a very long time to get to their pinnacle of power, to even rival GER, have just literally just been getting rage amps and just resolve development to get to that point. The idea that you need an arrow to become the strongest is fucking out the window on the road, dude. And no discredit to GR or anybody that likes him. He's still one of the strongest stands. It's just time has moved on and progressed past him. There is no point of using GR anymore. Even Araki has very few times brought him up ever. People really do just get attached to certain parts of history when it comes to certain characters, as it's pretty common for a lot of power scaling communities that one character just reigns above them all, even though that might not actually be the case. And I'm not totally against the idea of doing Soft and Wet Go Beyond versus Gold Experience Requiem, as that's still on the board. Looking at it currently though, it just seems like one side has more information on it than the other that isn't outdated. So I think that's all I have to say. Well, like, comment, share, subscribe.
Very interesting. Software and Go. Just another OP stand. And he's definitely the most broken one.